Hi, this is Bailey Bodie, and while I'm at work, I'm listening to the Two Trees podcast.
Hey, it's Kristen. If the Two Trees has been a blessing to you, please leave us a review on your favorite podcatcher or visit our website at www.thetwotreespodcast.org and click the yellow Buy Me a Coffee icon to leave a donation. And now, let's join the conversation.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Two Trees podcast. I am one of your hosts. I'm John Dillon, and I'm here with Rosemary Moeller.
Hello.
And Martin Lissner.
Hey, y'all.
Martin, you got a sponsor for us today.
And I'm super excited about this sponsor. First, we had Eve's Orchard, if you remember.
Delicious
yes.
apples.
And then we had Adam's Ribs,
So good.
which is a good one. Today, I can't believe we got these guys on board. This is just absolutely amazing. We have Moses's Maps.
Unbelievable.
Moses's Maps, they sell the best maps for those who enjoy the scenic route.
Yes.
Guaranteed to add 40 years
My
to your
mom
trip.
would buy that.
Yeah, we're not going directly there, but there will be no traffic.
Matter of fact, I will
guarantee
take you to the worst locations. How do you feel about deserts?
Well, some people enjoy them. I mean, you can go on a safari maybe. Are they in the
The
desert?
wilderness.
Oh, yeah. Why not?
Yeah. So thanks. Huge shout out to Moses's Maps for bringing you this episode of the Two Trees podcast.
We also have some good reviews coming in, and I really enjoy reading these. I can't believe I have never read them until now. This one says that we are both fun and deep. And this is from our friend, I'm not really sure how to pronounce people's, tags or whatever they put on here. So it's
Usernames.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. Handles YAKLUI. And they say they love the fun atmosphere of the crew, and the conversations and teachings are very insightful. And it's easy to tell they required a lot of study, yet they make it fun and easy to learn in this format.
Oh, that's encouraging.
It actually is encouraging, especially when you know that I am the least fun person I know. I am not fun. So fun and deep.
Rose, you're the captain of our team.
That's true.
Does that make me fun?
We wouldn't have elected you captain if you weren't fun.
Or organized.
Kristen is organized. Martin and Aaron are fun.
Yes.
So I'll just take deep.
And John brings the
a
studying.
not fun person is
That's how we work together.
You say something. That's what I want. To do. That's enough. Now sit down.
You talk back. All right. Then let's continue.
All right. Well, we're pushing our way through. This is season 4. We've been talking about how words differ from culture to culture, and the concept we're going to be talking about today is the idea of temples, because most people today, when they think of temple, they think church, right? It's a place where people are going to go in, sit in their pews or chairs, whether there was a latte in the lobby or not, says what denomination you're in. And it's a place for the people to gather and to worship. Maybe a podium up front, some singers up there, drums, maybe something going on. But you can kind of tell that all of us seem to have adopted a very similar style, whether you're in a synagogue or you're in Eastern Orthodox or a Protestant church, doesn't matter. It's very similar. Not in the specifics, but in the layout, right? You got a stage, you've got seats for people. And then you look at temples in the Old Testament, and some of them are real small. You're like, where did the people gather? Where are the pews? Where's the platform for the speaker? And you realize pretty quickly they had a very different idea of what they were doing when they went to a temple. It wasn't a place for a grand congregation to come and to worship and take up an offering. They viewed it more as it's a palace. It's a place where the spiritual world and the physical world overlapped. And you're going to see temples in the ancient Middle Eastern world that are Egyptian or Sumerian or Israelite, all of these things. And they're going to have cultural distinctions, things that make them unique. But they're going to have a lot of things in common as well. Just like in our culture today, you're going to find a large space for a crowd. You're going to find a place where the priest or the preacher addresses the crowd. You'll have music involved in these things. There are similarities, even if all of the bells and whistles are different. It's based on a real similar culture. Does that make sense?
It does and it doesn't.
That's how I know I succeeded.
Yeah. I think that it sounds like what you're saying, the difference is between an original temple and a modern day worship center, I don't know what else to call it, is there is no instruction going on in the very earliest version. Like, you don't need someone to stand in front of people and tell them things. Are you?
No, they would have that as part of what was going on. It just didn't happen. Like, we don't have a place where we're like, okay, no one goes back in that room because God's back there. Mm-hmm. We don't go over there because this is the holy space where the sacrifice is offered. Where like there's forbidden zones. Like, you may have places that you respect and you say, okay, this is for that. But ancient people really viewed this as a spot where the heavens and the earth kind of mushed together. We have events that we think are doing that, depending on how you view baptism or communion, whether you're a sacramentalist or not. But the place isn't something that really comes up a whole lot.
It's interesting, though, because I think in the back of our mind or somehow in our being, we still have that mentality. I mean, you look at movies all the time. When someone's in deep trouble, they go to the church.
Oh, yeah.
Why? Because they feel like they can address God in a way that they can't in their living room.
That's right.
So there is this still somehow deep inside of us, there's this idea that the overlapping of the spiritual and the natural with that. And when you talk about the Holy of Holies, when I was 7 years old, you did not go up on that stage and behind that podium because you knocked that over, you're in big trouble. So there is still this idea of like sacredness of where the action is happening. I think a little bit. So in the back, we don't say it though. And we don't come out and be like, absolutely not. There's rules and there's regulations and whatever. But somehow deep inside of us as a human being, we have a similar understanding to what a temple is, but we just don't do it in our consciousness, I guess.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think, Rose, you're very correct. And the major difference being a temple was not necessarily a place for gathering. It was a place where something was. And from that place poured out the power of the deity. And so when you're reading through the Bible and it talks about high places, or even talking about the temple, the way like Jonah talks about the temple, that's what we're going to talk about today. How was Israel different? How did the pagans think about these things? What makes the God of the Old Testament and the New Testament, what makes him different?
Are we going to talk more about Melchizedek? Or
Melchizedek?
Chiz,
I don't know.
Tomato,
I'm not going to talk about him at all, except for right now. And so what we do know is that a temple, if you wanted to boil it down, a temple is a marker for sacred space. That's what it is. Ancient people expected to see the supernatural world impacting the physical world around them. That was normal. No one was surprised by this. In their minds, they deeply connected the landscape around them, the events of the world around them, even the stars in the sky. There wasn't this hard line between the spiritual world and the physical world. And so they're looking at things and they're saying, okay, this is a place where some spiritual being is emanating power from. And that's why you have like Baal Zephon or Baal Harmon or Baal of random city, wherever. There is a thing here, a spiritual being that they believed is connected to that cave or that grove or that whatever. But, 5 miles away, there may be a different one. And so you have spots all across the place that are connected to almost like what Jacob does, right? He goes to Bethel or Luz, right, which is olive branches. And so there he is, and he has this dream. And he says, oh, man, God spoke to me here. I saw the gates of heaven. And so what does he do? He sets up a stone. He marks the place as a sacred site. Even the name means house of God. And so he didn't just say, wow, I had this great experience. God really loves me, which is what I think most of us would do. Like if you had an amazing dream where God spoke to you, you're probably not going to think this patch of dirt is different than that patch of dirt. You're going to think, wow, God reached out to me. Or at least that's been my experience. Maybe you do think differently, but the ancient peoples would have made that additional step of saying this is a special place.
But the people today do the same thing. I mean, especially baseball players. How many times will a baseball player wear the same socks because he hit a home run in those socks, as if they are the special socks that bring the authority for him to hit it over the fence? That kind of superstition idea, I think, leans into this, where it's like this spot is what it takes to reach out to this deity. If I wear the same clothes I did last game, I'm going to have the same game that I had last game. And so that's still, again, all of this stuff is somehow in the back of our mind and still infused in our culture, but not at the forefront like it
that's
used
what
to
I
be.
mean. It's not that it's gone. It's just that it's treated differently today.
Sure.
And so, go ahead.
I was going to ask, this is specific to Jacob. You said that, like, if that were to happen to us, we might interpret it more personally. Do you think that with Jacob, he feels the responsibility of the, and you will all the nations be blessed, that was given to Abraham and then on to him, even in his self-centered, bizarre activities, maybe he still remembered that?
I would like to think so.
And so that's
Jacob
why-
is a very snake-like character.
Isn't he the one whose name means the deceiver?
Yeah, he's an odd character. Like he comes out having grasped the heel of his brother, which gives off like the serpent will bite your heel and you'll crush its head. Like and Jacob he's a sketchy fellow. The redemption arc of Jacob is beautiful. And when you read the story, you realize Jacob, wherever he goes, God is with him. And so he kind of shows that the pagans are not understanding this idea as fully. And now the demonic world, the fallen host of heaven may have acted this way, but the God of heaven, the God of gods, the Lord of lords, he's not bound to a physical location. He can do whatever he likes, wherever he likes, however he likes.
And now the question, I think, on the other side of this is, was the temple something that was necessary for the Elohim that is not God Most High? Because if you look, I mean, I know we're going to get the connections to Eden and the idea that God was in that place. So that was like his, but if you look at it like a power outlet, if you need to plug into the Elohim that you need to go to where the outlet is. The outlet doesn't move on the wall. You have to take your cord to the outlet. So is there like proof in that, or is there actual reality in that they were? I know we did some territorial
So
spirit
I think
stuff.
so, and I'll explain to you why. I believe there is a great difference in the nature of the fallen host and the God of gods, the Lord of lords, the Lord Most High. He desires to serve, and they desire to be served. You would never find Baal washing the feet of his priests.
Right.
You would find him like Molech. Go ahead and sacrifice your children. You know, that kind of a thing. I am so high, you'll have to beg for my approval. When you read the story of the God of the Bible, though, Jonah talks about this. I didn't want to come to Nineveh because I knew you were a forgiving God and a loving God, and you were just going to let them off. I knew as soon as they repented, you would be all forgiving, and Jonah's furious about it because the nature of the Lord is different. And so I believe that there really are spiritual beings who desired to be and still desire to be worshiped. And I believe that they really did communicate with these priests of the ancient world. And so whether or not those are actually their names, it doesn't really matter to me, or how it corresponds one-to-one. I don't think that happens either. But what I do believe is that when they claimed to be making contact with the spiritual world, they really were. And in many ways, the darkness models itself after God.
Sure.
It's in mockery, or it's emulating, it's japing. And so what it's doing is, where did they get this idea of a sacred place from? And I believe it comes from the Garden of Eden. And we're going to kind of talk about this. But when they went to a temple, like a temple is a place, like you said, you're plugging into the power outlet. This is the source. This is where the power of that particular spiritual being manifested itself.
It's just so interesting to me, because I get the fact that they are trying to do the same thing that God did when he created. He created a space where he could easily and fluently communicate with his creation. That's the Garden of Eden. they are taking that and mocking it or emulating it or trying to do the same thing. Is that because that's the only way they know to do it, or it's the only way that it can be done?
That we don't know. A lot of this is going to be speculation. Like, I can talk to you about the historical realities, and I'm going to make those clear. But I'm also kind of leaning forward into what do I think is happening. So if you're listening to this, and you're like, I don't know, John, where's the Bible verse that says that? Well, a lot of it doesn't say that. What we're doing is we're talking about if this is true and this is true, what's the implication from that? And so this is more of a fun, randomly episode.
Is there any like biblical narrative where that happens without a temple?
Yes, there is. That's kind of how you found a sacred place, was that this event happened here. And so what I think happens, like, and you get instances in the Bible where it talks about Satan's seat, or, that the idea that spiritual being is not an omnipresent being. It is in a place. It is a single being who exists someplace.
Right.
And he has set up in many ways. The Bible talks about there being principalities and powers, the rulers of the darkness of this world. It's not a soup in the sense like it's all swirled together. Those are territorial terms. They seem to have been connected to specific people groups or specific places. And so when you went, for instance, to a holy spring, lots of these are everywhere, in every culture, you'll find pools of water that are called sacred springs. This isn't just a puddle of water. It was seen as a life-giving source where the God, the Elohim, the spirit being, had broken through the earth and was pouring out blessing onto the land. So that water had life in it. That's what made the plants grow. This is special, holy water. And so they would take that water and funnel it down into their channels. They're like, wow, look at the Nile River. It's making everything alive. But then the Egyptians also talk about the Nile River as though he is a deity or she is a deity. And they're talking about this because this is how they viewed what was happening. There is a power in the waters. Now, in reality, what you have there is that God created a complex and beautiful world. Water has a chemical balance. It's designed to do this. But these spiritual beings seem to have tried to take credit for what the Lord Most High had designed. And so they're stealing, and they're making an imaginary theology around themselves, claiming to be something that they are not, and lying to the people who are worshiping them.
It reminds me of a story/joke where there's a bunch of scientists, and they've claimed that they have like figured out enough of intelligence that they can create their own beings and create their own humans. And so they're talking with God, and they say, see, we're just like you, we can do that. And he goes, well, go ahead and create, another human being. So the scientist reaches down and grabs up a handful of dirt to create a human the same way God does. And God says, that's mine. The dirt belongs to God. And so it's the same idea. These deities are taking credit for the creation that God has and saying, see, we can do the same thing you can. And he's saying, you're using my building blocks.
That's right.
And so it's not the same. We are not equals. You can take what I have created and make something good out of it the same way we can. As human beings, we can take God's creation and bless those around us. Think of Abraham. You can be a blessing or a curse. Same idea. We have that ability, but we can't say that we created what we're utilizing to then further the kingdom. That's where the glory goes to God.
Yeah, and you can definitely, and this is where it's conjecture, right? You're looking at, and you can say, okay, this is what people did. Was there actually a spiritual being who was communicating with them? And I think that there was. I think the Bible makes this pretty clear. But you're not going to get a Bible verse that says, and Satan said, I'm going to steal all the things that God wanted.
Right.
But the I wills of Satan kind of talk about this. I'm going to ascend. I'm going to be above others. I will be like the Most High. And so you're looking at this and you're saying, why does the whole world, the whole pagan world, look at the natural aspects of God's creation and attribute them to the power of these spiritual beings? And I think it's because they lied to them and they said, this is mine. Why, for instance, like the water pours out of this spring, right? And so this is a sacred spring, and so it makes the plants to grow. But people also recognized, I have a horrible sickness. If I go bathe in the waters of that pool, maybe it will make me better. The power of that pool. So this is the logic that a pagan person would have had talking about a sacred spot. And you get glimpses of this in the Bible. There's a pagan man named Naaman. who comes down into Israel, and he has leprosy. And Elijah tells him, go out and dunk yourself a bunch of times in the Jordan River. Like, not in the spring of the Jordan River, not into like a sacred place. Just pick a spot, any old spot in the river, dunk yourself 7 times. And Naaman kind of looks at him like, why? This is the muddy. There are way better spots. Like if this was what you wanted me to do, like you got to tell, like this is the sacred pool right here. That would be what he was expecting. Instead, what you get is that God's grace pours onto him when he obeys. And that 7th time he comes up clean. And you kind of get the idea, like after 6 times, he's like, this is ridiculous.
People are looking at him jeering, you know. Like,
Yeah,
"Oh,
but
do it
God
again."
is faithful. The same thing happens when Israel crosses the Jordan, right? Remember, it's when their feet step into the water that God stops the flow of the water. It's not the moment they determine to go into the water. They're going. And then the Lord reacts. And so there's this concept of faithfulness that is part of the way that we approach God. But the pagan world didn't think that way. You came to the electrical outlet, and from that electrical outlet flowed forth power, and you could access it in other places.
But the idea is, if you use the outlet, I think that's a good analogy, is like when you plug into the outlet, you get the power. Like it is a transaction.
yeah, it's rubbing off on you. You're soaking in it.
There is no faith that you have to do. You physically input into the outlet and the electricity comes to you. That's how you transaction. And that's how they viewed these other Elohim, is like, as long as I go to this place, you have to bless me or you have to give me what I want.
Yeah, and and obviously this is a modern example, and they wouldn't have talked about outlets, but this is just me trying to find a way to communicate an ancient idea. And so, but they also saw the landscape around them as reflecting supernatural presences. So if you went to a place and nothing is growing there, or it appears to be a place where plants won't live and animals won't live, and the ones that do live there eat other animals, like the wilderness, the desert, they would look at that and say, something is here that is devouring life, right? So like the spring mentality would be a deity that's pouring forth life. A desert, people would look at that and they would wonder, what is it that's sucking, leaching the life from this land? And so they talk about demons in the wilderness, monsters in the wilderness, and people would offer sacrifices to appease these evil spirits, or they would make sacrifices to their particular deity, hoping that he would bless them. And kind of going back to Moses' maps, God does this with the Israelites. You don't have to sacrifice to the wilderness demons. You're mine. Everywhere your feet tread, that's yours. I'm going to protect and guide you. And so what God does is he's bashing this ancient concept of there's a power here, be careful, because he is the God of gods, the Lord of lords. He had just broken the powers of Egypt. What is this desert thing going to, even if there is nothing there or is something there, the Lord is with you and he's going to provide.
But if you were going into the desert, you would go to the spring, I would think, and prepare yourself by bringing a skin that you could fill with water, and then you would go into the desert. But that only lasts until the water runs dry.
Right.
And so that's the mentality, the logic is still there. Like, I can't go into the desert and drink from the spring that is miles away that way. But God says, as long as you believe and are faithful, the spring comes with you. And that's something that doesn't make any sense. We can't move a well. You dig a well, especially in ancient, like, you're wealthy.
Yeah.
You got the water.
And this is what's cool about the Lord in the book of Exodus. Everyone's grouchy. We don't have anything to drink. No problem.
Yeah.
Moses, go talk to the rock.
Hit a rock.
Yeah, don't hit
Don't
the rock.
hit
Yeah,
the
yeah.
rock.
Moses' maps sometimes gives bad directions.
Exactly. But it's the same, like, use the analogy that we were talking about today of the power outlet. You can't go across your room and just magically move the electricity through the air and do this. But that's
Tesla, you know.
Yeah, exactly. But that's how God works. Yeah, I am the outlet, says God, but I have basically Wi-Fi of electricity. Wherever
Yeah.
you are, you have access
And
to the same.
that's a beautiful concept.
and it
Even though
doesn't go away.
The idea of manna in the wilderness, the idea of the quail, the idea of the water, those are examples that an ancient Israelite would have seen God dominating evil in the world. Rose, you and I were talking about light and darkness. This would be an example of that. They would have seen that differently. Like if that were to happen to me, that would be really impressive. But I would view that in terms of God's power over the natural world.
I was thinking how this is making more sense about the ancient cultures who grew up around the river valleys, like the Nile River Valley, the Indus River Valley. It was both practical and spiritual. Is this because they would only gather at a place where there was life, and water means life.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Well, even to the point where in India, the Ganges River was considered,
A holy river.
healing, and it still is actually. So that's pretty interesting.
And so it's cool when you talk about these natural phenomena, but then the temple is kind of the river, is what we're saying?
Yeah, well, Ezekiel is going to talk about how there is a river that pours out of the temple and it brings life to the land.
Even in the Garden of Eden, it has like a river that divides into four, headwaters.
That's
and
where we're going.
There's tons of life there.
And so what I'm trying to do here is to explain that worldview that an ancient person would have had. And that's important because when you're reading the Bible, the characters that you're reading about had these thoughts floating around in the back of their head. Not all of them, as a matter of fact, none of them went to seminary. The idea that, Jacob
Really?
had been classically trained in theology proper, it just isn't the case. He went to sleep on a rock, and that's sketchy. And so then he's looking at this, and he's like, wow, what happened here? I better mark this site because this is a spot where there is power.
But what I really enjoy about conversations like this is, for me at least, I can see the logic so easy. Like, it makes so much sense what you're talking about. Like, here's the river, and you got to go to the river to get the water or the healing or whatever it is. I mean, if you look at it from just a natural standpoint, you got to drink to live. So you got to go to the river to do that. You can easily say that it's a spiritual thing. Like, okay, if I know as a human being I need something and it's only over there, I need to walk over there and get it. Same thing with the spiritual thing. If I'm dealing with a spiritual oppression or just doubts or whatever, I have to go to where it is. Like that, these people in the ancient days have the exact same logic that you have today.
Yeah, they're not dumb at all.
And that you're living through your life with this same exact logic. Again, go back to the power supply. If I need to turn on a light, I got to go over to where the electricity is. That's the only thing that makes sense. So when I approach my God, the God of gods, my first thought is I need to go to where he is. And Jesus is going to tell you, you guys are missing it. Like, he is everywhere. Every
Yeah, and
molecule
not only
is
that,
designed
but
by that.
he's going to make you a holy site. The Spirit of God will indwell you. And so it isn't just the idea of, okay, I want to get this thing, but if I wanted to get favor from a king, I would go to his palace and try to approach the king. Or I would try to bribe one of his officials, maybe, or something sketchy like that. They viewed the same way when they looked at priests. If you're going to that's where the deity is. Like, that's the doorway to its sphere of influence. And so you go there. Like, that's what you were doing. The way that God has taught us to approach him is so much bigger than anything that the pagan world was throwing around.
Well, even we have been working our way through on the incarnation, and we are finally at the last part of it. But the entire message is that he's came to us.
Yeah.
He was incarnated and he came down. We don't have to go find the power source because he's here.
In the pagan world, when you do find the gods coming down to be in the world, it's almost always negative. Like, if Zeus shows up, some woman is about to have a baby because he is gross human.
Speaking of sketchy.
Yeah, he's sketchy. You don't find people are like excited to find the deity has manifested. He's come to take something. And so when you're reading this, when God arrives, it's a pouring out. It's a giving. And then he even uses that spring mentality. He's at the well in Shechem, and the woman's at the well, and he says, hey, I'll give you living water. And she's like, yeah, give me some of that living water. I would love to never thirst again. And you realize, oh, he's not just talking about actual water. He's talking about a spiritual reality. And so as a modern reader, I have the temptation to overly naturalize a passage, and an ancient person would have had the problem of overly spiritualizing the problem. And so the answer is going to be somewhere in the middle. And honestly, a lot of it is we don't know. I am left dependent on the Lord my God. And that's how he intends it to be.
I like the idea that when one of the pagan gods would come down, there was this almost fear, probably. And there's so many ways that you can link that to today. Think of like the principal. When the principal shows up in your classroom, there's not this idea of, hey, we're going to leave school or we're going to get a prize or whatever. It's like there's there's discipline that's coming to this. But then when you think of, like, this is so silly, he's an authority figure, and mainly his job is discipline and order. But then if you think of like Santa Claus, he's an authority figure that brings what? Joy and hope and love and peace and all this. And I know that these are completely separate ideas, but it's when they're coming to them, there's an expectation of something completely different.
Yeah.
And so you can see so many, these are silly examples I just came off the top of my head. You can see so many examples in today's world of the idea of the emotional response that you get from an authority figure coming to you, and which one is much more attractive than the other to us. And we should, I think, be able to view the spiritual world in the same way. Like, which one is more attractive and why? Which one has fruits that we want to eat from, and which one has fruits that cause destruction?
Yeah, there's a reason that the pagan world responded so positively to the gospel. They were like, this is way better than the stuff that these other things are selling.
Especially if you were used to looking at your it only as transactional, like you were saying, I will show up and do this and you will give me that. The relationship isn't there. There is no relationship. And if there is, it's just a fear-based one. And that is what is missing in the pagan world versus, when Christianity, when
I think
when
you're
Christ
exactly
came.
right. So there's other places that you find like sacred groves or forests or places where there were really big trees were seen as sacred sites. And you're going to find these a lot in the Bible, the oaks of Mamre or a particular grove. These places are almost always designated as sacred sites. There was worship going on there. And the reasoning is the same. They would look around and they'd be like, wow, these trees are impressive. Much bigger than other trees in other places. There must be some power that is infusing these trees. And so they would decorate the trees. They would hang offerings from the branches, or they would pour offerings out on the roots. If there wasn't a forest, you wanted to make one, you would raise up what the Bible calls asherim, which are like a totem pole kind of a thing, very different from the way that Native Americans are using totem poles. But in ancient Middle Eastern idea was you were making a large idol made of a tree, and then you're pouring sacrifices onto it, trying to kind of jumpstart the presence of the deity. You can attract it to this place.
So, quick question. You say it's not the same as how the Native Americans made theirs, but is it different? I mean, I was thinking about Serpent Mound when you were talking about temples and things, and it feels like the spiritual world did translate itself over here in some manner.
I don't know a ton about totem poles. From what I understand, they're more storytelling, but I don't know that. That may be just me having watched too many of, little Einsteins.
Also, from my internet research, the lowest man on the totem pole was actually the most important. So we kind of say that incorrect.
Ooh,
When you
is
say
that
you're the low
right?
man on the totem pole, that was actually like the most important one.
It makes sense because he's the strongest. He's holding it up.
You'll
Or
have to
the
do your
most
own
accessible.
internet research, but
Yeah, the building of a mound, for instance, even one that is made to look like it doesn't have to be very tall, but what they would do, this is the most common, is that of mountains or high places. And so if you are looking at the world naturally and you go outside, and you're like, the earth is typically, pretty rolly. It's got some plains, but there are some places where a mountain just like erupts up into the sky. And ancient people looked at that and they were like, whoa, something happened to the earth over there. What was it that drew the earth up into the heavens? Mankind, if there wasn't a mountain around and you wanted to reach up into the heavens, they would make a hill or a mound. They built mountains or utilized ones that were already there. How many ancient cultures have their gods living on top of a mountain? That's not an accident. That's because they were viewing the world this way. The earth is responding to the spiritual powers that they believed were there. Now, in reality, that's a mountain. It's made by natural phenomenon. Or at the very least, the Lord formed the earth this way. Zeus did not make this. But they were, I think, implying that we did. That was Marduk and all these other deities. They were saying, this is sacred to us. Behold the greatness of the mountain. You can see my power. And so when they built a mound, like the Serpent Mound, or a ziggurat, like you'd find in Mesopotamia, they were attempting to reach into the spiritual world. Even though it is vertical, it's a bridge. It's an attempt to cross over and acquire the blessing of this deity. To spice it up even more, You would align it with certain signs in the heavens, right? The door to this place points to this star, or on this day, the sunrise goes into the chamber in the middle. There are so many Neolithic sites that talk about this kind of thing, where you find things on the earth that mirror things in the heavens. And because they thought of the heavens as the spiritual world, or as an expression of the spiritual world, when you go to like Serpent Mound and you realize even the coils of this point to astronomical signs, that's not accidental, and that's not timekeeping. That's them attempting to harness the power of the deity to bless whatever endeavor they were after.
I think that, Martin, you're going on a cruise here this spring, aren't you?
Woohoo. Yes.
Are you going to Mexico?
Yes.
You should go on one of the excursions. Are you going to go find a ziggurat, a temple, anything like that?
We're swimming with dolphins.
See, you're fun.
Well, ask them
You
what
are,
they know. They're smart.
you are a fun person. I would get off that boat and go find a ziggurat.
Kristen wants to go do the ruins, but it's
Yeah.
like a 9-hour event, and we have a 7-year-old, and I don't think he wants to look at ancient rocks for 9 hours.
This will be a future Two Trees field trip.
So-
Are they called field trips if you're not in school?
We call them whatever we want. Research trip.
Yes, let's do it.
That sounds
All right.
fancier.
So-
we can all carry briefcases and look smart.
So, John, I have
Sunglasses.
a very weird question.
Now we're talking.
Well, and I already brought up Santa Claus, so I feel bad for asking the question, but
I'm not going to debate the reality of Santa Claus.
when you're talking about the mountains and how they viewed them as like a spiritual deity bringing forth the earth up. Today, we say that it's tectonic plates that mashed against each other and have formed this, or it's a river that is eroded over however long to make a valley.
Which is true. That's what happened.
And so we have that. But what I'm trying to get at is the scientific experiment that we have today, or the experience that we have today, is that something that's just utilized by the darkness to get us away from a spiritual thing? Or is that something that they have instilled into us so we stray farther
I
from
think
the
it's
spiritual?
a fact that can be used either to deepen your relationship with God or to pull you away. I think that really is how mountains get made. Tectonic plates shift or erosion, all those things. But I also know that this is sometimes called the God of the gaps, is that God must have done it. Well, when I look at the world, I don't see an absence of God. I see an incredibly organized, beautifully designed, and I don't see that as the absence of God. I see that as a designer. Another person might say, well, now I just don't need to have this conversation. Satan will wield whatever weapons he has to try to pull you away from loyalty to God. C.S. Lewis has this great line in the Screwtape Letters where he says, if we're trying to, this is the John Dillon paraphrase, if we're trying to lull them to sleep, we make no magicians and we don't harass them. If we're trying to make them cower in our presence, then we overplay our hand. We get really involved. Lots of magicians, lots of powers, lots of things. And if you look at the world around us, at least here in the West, the tactic he seems to have been using is that of sleepiness. Don't make them think about spiritual powers or realities like that. And so you look at it and you say, I don't know, but Satan is going to do whatever he can to remove you from an interaction with the Lord.
Because, even back in the times that we're talking about, the biblical times, there was this idea of looking into the stars. I mean, they were utilizing instruments that helped them scientifically, physically understand the stars a little bit different. They then attributed them to the creation and to the God and to the Elohim. But it seems like the more that we advance, the less we attribute it to that. And is that just our own rebellion that is leading into like, okay, we can figure this out ourselves. We don't need God to instill in us how we know the world works. And the reason I ask this question is because in my life, that's kind of one of the biggest ideas. As long as I can figure it out, as long as I can have a better understanding of it, then I can pull my boots up one strap at a time, and I can figure out how to go through this. So leaning on our own understanding really separates us from God, and the Proverbs will tell you that. But I think this scientific experience, at least for me, is one of the biggest driving factors of like, okay, I don't need God anymore because I can run my house. I don't need God because I can get myself to work. I don't need God because I can do this. Instead of, wow, look at all this advancement that God has created and I get to enjoy.
Yeah, let me address that just for a minute here and say, like, I think that those things are good and true realities. to understand how the world works is a noble goal and something that God intended humanity to pursue. He gave us very intelligent brains and has made his world understandable. And so he is not displeased when we discover thunder and lightning and why they work that way. What does happen, though, is that we have the tendency to turn God into a transactional being. I don't want you because you do things. I should want you just because I love you and I see what you have done, and there's a beauty in it and a loyalty that's there. And so it's not one or the other, it's both. And so when we discover, okay, for instance, earthquakes were seen as divine acts. Typically in the Greek world, they were connected to the ocean, the god of the sea, because he's chaotic. And so when the earth starts moving around like the ocean does, that's a bad thing. And so they would look at this and they'd say, this is the God at work. Well, it's not. It's the earth rumbling. But those spiritual beings were quick to take credit for what was going on. And instead what I find is that the greatest mind that has ever existed has woven out of nothing the physical realities of the world, and its workings are so incredibly complex that we can study them our whole lives and never come to a complete understanding of any of the processes. That ought to pull me into wonder. Instead, what often happens is we settle into a smug know-it-allness.
And to finish the sentence, to bring this all back to exactly what we're talking about here, God did that with the Garden of Eden. And then these other beings saw, okay, so that's how it's done. They figured it out. I know how to have the same relationship with humans that God does. All I have to do is get them to build me a temple, or all I have to do is establish a high place the same way the garden was established by God Almighty. And then, boom, I have the same transactional appearance that God has with the human beings.
That's right.
So I become that. And that's the understanding that they had, and they took that. And so that's a warning to us, I think, if we're reading through this. That's a warning to us. We don't need to find out and figure it out so we can then establish the same relationship with something that God did with us. We need to figure it out so we can then appear closer with him, so we can have a better understanding for the wonder and the amazement that he has provided for us and through us, and then build onto that, extend what that relationship we have with him to everybody around us. I mean, that's the Great Commission right there. Instead, we warp it into the same idea that the spiritual beings were doing. All I have to do is establish blank, and then I get blank. And it's like, okay, there's a great idea of understanding so you know how God works, but only to build more glory for him.
Yeah, and I think that the way we talk about these things, Martin, is most people are not going to have those thoughts naturally in the West. We are, though, the longer you begin to think about the reality of the supernatural world as a Christian who going through the discipleship process, you got to think about these things. Like, why? When the Bible talks about Satan has blinded the eyes of those that believe not, there seems to be an implication that he is tampering with the data, that he's after messing with your mind. And so when I see something beautiful, like a mountain, my heart is pulled towards worship. When I see the stars, the work of your hands, the scripture says, I worship. That doesn't mean I don't know that it is a giant burning ball of gas way out there in space, but I also see them as much, much more. Tolkien's poem Mythopoeia talks about this, that if you do not see the stars first as parts of stories, you'll never understand what the ancient peoples were talking about. And so, for instance, the building of pyramids or ziggurats, from a purely practical standpoint, if you want to build something tall, that's the most natural way to do it. And so it makes sense that you would find them in so many cultures spread all over the world. But all of them talk about them as though they are building mountains and incorporate a spiritual aspect into them. I believe that's not an accident. It's because there really is a spiritual world that they're interacting with. And so, for instance, you can see ziggurats in Sumeria or the pyramids in Mexico, all over the world. In Egypt, like where Moses grew up, their beliefs were that the whole world was covered in water, and that when the gods emerged, there was a mountain that like shot up out of the sea. So that's what I meant earlier. Like the mountains are places where the gods have done a thing. And so what they did is they built their temples on the places where they thought those things happened. They didn't just look around and be like, man, there is a great deal on some riverfront property over on the South Bend. Let's build the temple there. They were looking for significant places, historical or supernatural concepts. And they built these temples to commemorate this deity because this is a place his power poured out. The walls of the temples were sometimes built to look like waves. They're not straight. They're curvy, and they would put images like reeds or water-loving plants in the temples because they believed that the god was dwelling there. And so you want to make it nice. You want to make it a palace, and you would bring in things that they believed appealed to the god. So if this is a good god, the god that gives life, they would bring in gardens into the temple, lots and lots of plants and animals. And the whole purpose of the temple is to show the world what the God is like. It's showing, not telling. If you see a modern day church today and it's made out of a steel building, no one assumes, yep, God is a plain Jane steel building God. We recognize this is just a place where the church gathers. But at times, humanity has transcended that. And we have built cathedrals to the glory of God. We have made things with the desire to show what God is like. The modernist doesn't understand this. This is why we look back at what people used to build and we're impressed. And we look at things that people build now with all of the extra advancements that we have and all of the extra understanding that we have, and it's a little underwhelming because we don't have this as a priority.
But we still do this. Look at sports stadiums. You don't build your stadium as a box with nothing on it. I mean, SoFi Stadium is magnificent, and it's to show how much power and money the Los Angeles Rams and Chargers have because they are showing you their might by building a brand new
that's a really
stadium.
good example, actually. So this isn't gone, but you don't find people building city halls like they used to.
Right.
Or a millionaire who's like, you know what, I'm going to make the library a wow factor. And people that we emphasize utilitarian way beyond beauty. And I think that's kind of sad. I think we've lost something there. But you can see it in what the ancient peoples were building. In Mesopotamia, they built their temples to the same pattern. They imitated this primeval mountain by building the ziggurats with their foundations in the earth and their tops in the sky. And at the very top, you put a little house. And that's where the god was dwelling, symbolizing the temple. It's a place where the spiritual world and the physical world overlapped, and access to the god was possible by means of this big staircase. And that's what Jacob is describing with the ladder, with the angels going up and down. And the great thing about the pyramids and the ziggurats, well, not the pyramids in Egypt, but the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, is that they wrote all over the things what they thought they were. And they gave them names like the bond between heaven and earth. That's what they called the one in Larsa. That's what they thought it was. In Kish, there's one called the House of Zababa and Inanna, whose head is as high as the heavens. It sounds very grand. But they thought it was a house. This is where these guys dwell. They did their best to make this place appealing. It was a palace. It also had a sacrificial area where you are burning up something and sending it up. You transformed it into smoke and ash. Something has happened to it. And they talk, especially the pagans, talk about God eating these things. The sacrifices please them. God's not eating, even in the Old Testament, God isn't devouring the sacrifices of the Jewish people. And so this is, again, a difference. But there is still a sacrifice. The image for the god would be an idol, something that demonstrated that the god was here. It was something for it to indwell. It was also a way of showing ownership. This is his face. This is his temple. And the gardens and things around the temple would be filled with animals, right? The temples would be decorated with plants, and they would bring in hippopotami, or they'd bring in crocodiles, or they'd bring in deer, they'd bring in colorful birds. All of this sounds like a knockoff Eden, which has at its root, the making of trees and the naming of animals and this presence where there's priests serving the god. The difference is that this is fake and shallow and superficial. And once you have seen the real, genuine item, you recognize it.
I just love this episode because it's showing how spiritual sports are.
Yes.
Martin, I just have to say this. When I was looking at this topic, I thought, there's no way Martin's going to be able to bring in a sports reference. Yes.
Are you kidding?
And you did it anyway.
It's perfect. I mean, you have a mascot, which is the idol. You have a stadium, which is the temple, and you have all of this. I mean, it's a representation.
People devote their Sundays to watching sports.
Well, I mean, John has a C on his helmet for the Guardians, the Cleveland, or his helmet, his hat, because
I'm not wearing a helmet. This is a baseball hat.
But it's the same idea. It's a way for us to express something because we desire the same relationship with a team or with an entity, if you want to call it that, because it doesn't dwell in the logo. It indwells in the mascot. But the team isn't the players. The team is the idea of the team. And it's a primordial way of us still, I believe, getting back to Eden, because you have the stadium, you have the mascots, you have but the entity that indwells in it is God Almighty. And that's what you need to have, because we desire it. It's inside of us. There's something inside of you that wants this idea.
Well, and this goes back to Hellenism. Remember, we talked about Hellenism, and Hellenism weaponized sports. They used them as they began to twist the ancient world into a new form, and it's not gone away. Like, we still have these concepts around today, and it just looks different. And the expectation of, you think, man, those guys were really dumb. They're not dumb. They just are expressing a different idea in a different way.
Right.
What you have, though, in the Bible is that God does not determine a completely different way of having people approach him. Instead, he very clearly uses tropes and things that were already existent in their culture, but he infuses them with new meaning and new purpose in an unmistakable way. None of the pagan people thought that Israel was just like them. And so even though some of the things looked similar, like there's a temple, they're offering sacrifices, none of them were thinking, yep, they're totally normal, just like us. It was loudly understood. But from our perspective today, you get a lot of Christians who are like, oh, that's got pagan origins, exit. The Bible doesn't do that. As a matter of fact, Jesus reuses words from Greek culture all the time. Most famous of them is church or apostle.
Gospel.
These are words that have a very real world connotation before Jesus came along, and he transforms them into something new. And so when I'm looking back and I'm seeing ancient cultures building temples, making zoos around them, filling them up with water, I'm not seeing something different. I'm seeing that they're trying to mock or to steal the idea
A recreation.
from God. And so let's go to the book of Deuteronomy. You guys are like, finally, a Bible verse. There's been so much speculation, and I'm not denying that. I'm trying to give you a little bit of speculation. Some of you guys have asked for it, so here it is. But now I'm back on solid ground. Yeah. Deuteronomy 12, 1 through 7. It's not an accident that there's 7 verses here, but let's jump into this. So this is God talking to Israel and saying, you're going into Israel. You are my children. You've just come through the desert using Moses' maps. And now what is it that I want you to do? So let's go to chapter 12, verses 1 through 7.
These are the statutes and rules that you shall be careful to do in the land that the Lord, the God of your fathers, has given you to possess all the days that you live on the earth. You shall surely destroy all the places where the nations whom you shall dispossess serve their gods, on the high mountains and on the hills and under every green tree.
Okay, we're going to pause there.
Of course we
So
are.
you're going to go in and you're going to knock out these fake centers of power. None of those deities are allowed to be in my space. They are rebels. They are liars. We're driving them out. Did you catch where they were centered their worship at? They were centered under mountains and hills and under every green tree. Those are groves. Those are the high places. Why is it that the Bible singles these out? Because it's a historical reality. What Deuteronomy is describing is the same thing that we discover through archaeology. This is where they were, and this is why they were there. So God doesn't say, go in there and cut down those trees. The tree's just a tree. He doesn't say, go in there and tear down that mountain. He says, remove the stain of this worship of this false deity from this thing and bring about a restoration. Much easier just to flush the whole thing away. God instead goes in and redeems something that has been defiled. That shows you something about the nature of God. He doesn't give up. He is faithful, and we're to be the same. Keep going.
You shall tear down their altars and dash in pieces their pillars and burn their Asherim with fire.
Asherim are those like man-made trees, like the totem pole kind of a things. Very tall idols.
You shall chop down the carved images of their gods and destroy their name out of that place.
Destroy their name out of that place. A name in the ancient world was more than just the sound. It was the unseen reality of a thing. It was, for instance, I have loved ones who have died and they are gone from my life. I cannot talk to them anymore. They are with the Lord. But their name is still important to me. I hold their memory in my heart. I named my children with these things in mind. There is a concept of the name, the sound doesn't matter. The thing that it represents, that is what we're meaning by the name. And so he's not saying just no one's allowed to say these syllables. He's saying remove the memory. The presence of this thing is to be driven out. And the Bible is going to make a tremendous amount of use out of the idea of the name of God. The idea of for your name's sake. This is a big idea that honestly we understand pretty well because we are used to the idea of companies and reputation and of representing an idea bigger than we are. In the ancient world, it was far more connected with your individual family. Who are you as a people? Who was your grandfather? Where did they dwell? And so what Jesus is, or God, Jesus is God, but what the Lord is revealing here is you go in there, and when you find their sacred sites, they're gone.
Feeling a lot of sports coming through with that, too.
Yeah.
The name of the team means more than just the players that are on there.
Yeah, it's supposed to represent, or even you'll have like a country that will represent itself with an animal. Like the bald eagle or a flag. And we infuse this. These are representations of a bigger idea that kind of looms behind the concept. And so the name of God, the Bible talks about the angel of the Lord and says, I've put my name in him. There's a sense of his being, the inner essence, if you want to use it that way. And these are all failing metaphors to describe an idea so big that I have a hard time getting my mouth around it. This is hard. And so what you're looking at here is their name goes away and my name is restored because it was mine first. I built this. I made this, and I'm giving it to you because it is mine to give. They are rebels, not independent powers who were here originally. This is God not driving out the original spiritual powers. This is him saying, I am the King of Kings. Yeah.
It's just, kick down some doors and get rid of them.
Yeah, these guys are gone. You're coming in and you honor my name. Keep going.
You shall not worship the Lord your God in that way, but you shall seek the place that the Lord your God will choose out of all your tribes to put his name and make his habitation there.
And so God says, you're not going to worship me like they worship their gods. And then he goes on to describe something that they would have understood because it's similar enough that they understand it and different enough that it's awkward. You're not putting up altars to me under every green tree. You're not going up on top of all of the mountains. I'm going to give you one place, and I'm going to manifest my power there. This was how he did it in the Old Testament. Today, he has taken that idea and exploded it into depth where there is not one place, there is one people. we are moving closer and closer back to the ideal of the Garden of Eden. And so today you have sacred people where we are demanded to defend one another, not pieces or patches of dirt. And it is the people who I value. And so why? Because they are made in the image of God, and the Spirit of God dwells within the church. You are to do good to the household of the Lord. And so you're reading this and you're like, okay, I can see how we're beginning to reverse directions. But God doesn't just dump on them a completely new system. He is speaking a language that they already understand, and that the ancient world is going to see similarities, but also radical differences. And so if the modern reader fails to see the radical differences, they did. All right, no one was concerned that the Lord was just like these other gods. They recognized him as a radically different message, even though to us it has a lot of similarities. Keep going.
There you shall go, and there you shall bring your burnt offerings and your sacrifices, your tithes and the contribution that you present, your vow offerings, your free will offerings, and the firstborn of your herd and of your flock. And there you shall eat before the Lord your God, and you shall rejoice, you and your households, in all that you undertake, in which the Lord your God has blessed you.
This is really beautiful. There is going to be a special place. And I'm going to manifest we know this is Jerusalem that's going to be described. Before that, they were in Shiloh, right? These were places that God said, this is where I want you to go. And you're going to figure it out. Did you notice it doesn't say the name?
Not in this passage.
It
no.
doesn't. You're going to read this and you're like, okay, it's the story is unfolding. Follow me. I'm going to make this known to you. Acknowledge me in all of your ways, and I will direct your steps. And so mankind and the fallen host of heaven, they were remembering what God had done in Eden. The priests of the fallen host, I think they really were communicating, or at least trying to, with the supernatural world around them. And when God spoke to them, he did, the true God, he spoke very clearly so that he was unmistakable from what the other things were doing, but also understandable in the culture that these things happened. So different aspects of worship were prevalent in different cultures. You're going to find differences, but you're also going to find a ton of uniting concepts that all funnel back to the first couple chapters of Genesis. And that's what our next podcast will be about. And luckily, I already have it written because we only got halfway through this outline.
Yeah. You're welcome.
So I suppose I should have said something clever so that I can say that Jesus is the God of gods, the Lord of lords, mighty and awesome.